Hey there guys, alright, today we are back with another Mark Felton Productions video. It's been a while, thought we'd come back and revisit him. This time, Liberating Dachau, 1945. Now this is going to be a very heavy video, because Dachau, obviously one of the extermination camps, the concentration camps during World War II. So this video is probably going to be, limited monetization, or demonetized even entirely because of the probable contents inside of the video. So before we dive in, I'm gonna again do what I've been doing. Go ahead, check out the links below in my pinned comment in my description box below, or in my pinned comment in the comment section. I have a link to my gaming channel there, where I'm just uploading old streams to, and then go follow me over at my Twitch, where I stream Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Fridays, and Saturdays from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. U.S. Central Standard Time. Would love to have you guys come over and hang out in the chat. But now that that's out of the way, go ahead and, learn about the liberation of Dachau.
At the end of April 1945...
Before we, actually, one thing I want to mention, if you watch the Band of Brothers, they liberate one of the concentration camps. Now, I can't remember which concentration that it was, which camp it was that they liberated in the show, but I think they handled that episode, I think, is the episode out of all of them, out of the Band of Brothers miniseries, that really stands out the most to me. Probably was my favorite one. Just really good fucking episode, and just the portrayal of that liberation, thoughts of the soldiers, and then like obviously how the soldiers wanted to help these people, but they really couldn't because of medical reasons. Why you can't really give them everything that they want to eat, because if they eat too much, they will end up killing themselves by eating too much, because they're that starved. To wean them, slowly ease them into normal. It was just fucking amazing. Band of Brothers on a whole. Good show.
At Dachau concentration camp near Munich, over 30,000 people were barely clinging to life under brutal SS guards.
Jesus.
Time was fast running out for the prisoners as the war situation continued to deteriorate for Germany. Action had to be taken, and taken fast. But who would take that action? On the 25th of April 1945, Germany had been cut in two when American and Soviet troops linked up at the town of Torgau on the Elbe River. The following day, US forces had crossed the Danube at Neuburg, Ingolstadt and Kelheim. At Dachau concentration camp was severely overcrowded.
I love that little clip there that they had the Americans meeting. It's just like, obviously we know of the tension between the two nations after World War II, but really then, I love it. One of my favorite things is seeing those moments of just, the regular people pretty much on opposing sides meet, connect. It's just
crowded due to the Nazi policy of evacuating West inmates from camps in danger of being overrun by the Red Army. The commandant, SS Obersturmbannführer Eduard Weiter, had written to Heinrich Himmler requesting permission to turn the camp over to the Americans. Himmler had angrily written back forbidding any such action. He added at the end of his letter, quote, "No prisoners shall be allowed to fall into the hands of the enemy alive," unquote. The prisoners at Dachau were ordered to be evacuated south into the Tyrolean Alps as part of German preparations for the Alpine Redoubt, their semi-mythical last stand in the mountains. The SS were also busily burning files and documents at the camp in the hope of covering their tracks. Dachau was the very first concentration camp, opened shortly after Hitler came to power in 1933. It held political prisoners, Jews, ordinary German and Austrian criminals, and foreign nationals of almost all of the countries attacked by Germany. The installation spawned over 100 sub-camps to house prisoners being used for forced labor. Well over 30,000 people died at Dachau, including many who perished in a program of medical experimentation by SS doctors. Commandant Weiter made efforts to follow Himmler's evacuation order. On the 26th of April, Weiter, most of his officers, and a strong guard detail left Dachau, escorting a death march consisting of 6,000 to 7,000 inmates to Tegernsee. During the 6-day march, thousands were executed or died of exhaustion, hunger, and exposure. One mass grave was later found to contain 1,071 bodies. Weiter then made himself scarce, going on the run in the Austrian mountains. SS Untersturmführer Heinrich Wicker, an extremely junior officer, was left in...
Just looking at his profile here, he just looks like a fucking Nazi.
In command at Dachau with about 150 guards.
He looks like an ass. Just looks like a fucking dickhead.
There were still tens of thousands of starving prisoners inside the camp, and the supply situation had by now completely broken down. Adjacent to the camp was several hundred Waffen-SS troops who would probably be used to exterminate the surviving prisoners at an appointed moment. Meanwhile, the Americans were fast approaching nearby Munich, the cradle of Nazism. The situation at the concentration camp was confused. Since the commandant, Weiter, the officers and most of the guards had absconded on the 26th of April, escorting a large party of prisoners south, the tall, scar-faced SS Untersturmführer Wicker had been left in charge. Though only a very junior officer, Wicker had come up through the ranks and was an experienced and decorated combat veteran. Due to wounds received in battle, he had been assigned to concentration camps. There were still over 30,000 prisoners inside the camp, and the food and water had run out some days previously. Wicker's orders were unclear. He knew that Himmler did not want the camp surrendered, but he lacked the manpower to kill all the prisoners, and so Wicker awaited orders that did not come. On the 29th of April, Red Cross official Victor Maurer convinced Wicker not to attempt to evacuate the camp, which would have killed thousands, and instead to surrender the facility and its inmates to the Americans. Maurer promised that if Wicker did this, then he and his men would be allowed to flee unmolested. Of course, the Americans had no idea of this agreement. The Americans did, however, have some inkling of the possible horrors that they would find at Dachau from an escaped inmate. On the 28th of April, Karl Riemer had managed to get out of the camp and walked through the night to the town of Pfaffenhofen. US forces had already reached the settlement, and Riemer briefed them about conditions at the camp and the desperate plight of the remaining prisoners. Lieutenant Colonel Felix Sparks, commanding...
That is such an American fucking name. Felix Sparks.
Officer of the 3rd Battalion, 157th Infantry Regiment, 45th Infantry Division, was ordered to relieve Dachau. He wasn't impressed by the job, considering the camp to be a non-military target. At 9:22 on the morning of the 29th of April, Sparks received a message from the 157th Infantry's S3 intelligence officer sent to all companies that upon the capture
How did one American have a bird?
of Dachau, they were to post guards around the camp and touch nothing, and also ensure that no one left the compound. Sparks commanded a small task force consisting of his own battalion from the 157th Infantry and the 191st Tank Battalion. He split the task force into 2 prongs, advancing on parallel roads towards Dachau, the first column under his personal command, the second under Major George Kessler. The problem for the Americans was that units from 2 of its infantry divisions were converging on Dachau. Sparks' 157th Infantry from the 45th Division would arrive around the same time as elements of the 222nd Infantry Regiment, 42nd Infantry Division, creating severe jurisdictional confrontations. At 10 a.m., Lieutenant Colonel Donald E. Downard, commanding the 2nd Battalion, 222nd Infantry, reported a skirmish at a roadblock near the camp and captured several Germans.
The music.
An hour later, Colonel Sparks' men also had a brief firefight with retreating German forces. At noon, inmates inside the camp saw American soldiers for the first time outside the perimeter. They rushed, cheering and crying towards the perimeter fences, but the SS opened fire, shooting down one man. 15 minutes later, Sparks briefly conferred with Lieutenant William Walsh, commanding Company I, 157th Infantry, ordering him to secure the camp and to keep the prisoners inside. "Don't let them out," ordered Sparks. "We've got all kinds of food and medicine and what have you coming in behind us, and we're going to take good care of them." Sparks ordered Company M's machine gun platoon to accompany I. Simultaneously, Sparks sent Company L to secure Dachau town. Although Sparks did not know it, Vicker and many Germans had gathered unarmed at the camp's main gate, awaiting the arrival of the Americans. Fearing heavy resistance, Sparks ordered Company I to advance up the railway line to the spur instead of through the main gate. On the railway line, Company I discovered an abandoned, engineless train. They counted 39 wooden wagons.
Oh no.
Sprawled on the track and around the fields bordering the line were many bodies, most showing signs of gunshot wounds.
Yeah.
When the GIs hauled open one of the wagon doors, they were dumbfounded by what they discovered. It was eventually established that there were 2,310 bodies of men, women, and children on or near the train, some naked, some wearing striped concentration camp uniforms. They were all severely thin, and many appeared to have died of starvation or thirst inside the locked carriages, callously left to die by the fleeing SS, while others showed evidence of execution by gunfire. The GIs were furious. Many also sought immediate vengeance on any Germans that they managed to capture. Shortly after,
I like that. I love that he mentioned that. Yes. Because technically that is a war crime, but also like I'm a fuck around. I would do the fucking same if I was in that same situation. Found myself with a group of other soldiers, and we found those bodies, and then we end up capturing some Nazis. They're gonna die. The trigger's getting pulled. I'm gonna have no remorse for it either.
Afterwards, Company I commanding officer Lieutenant Walsh shot 4 surrendering SS inside a wooden railway.
The SS, honestly, every single SS member, the SS know what they're signing up for. The only ones that I would probably even give a little bit of leeway to, or like in my mind can give some leeway to, are the ones that were put into the SS. Children, they grew up with the Hitler Youth and they were essentially brainwashed through that way. They get some leeway in my mind because it's definitely not their fault. They grew up in a completely like brainwashed kind of society. They're like getting manipulated by their leaders. They believe in certain things. Can't really blame the children.
Wagon.
But like full-blown fucking adults, no, fuck them.
That Albert Pruitt
Fuck them.
then climbed inside and finished off each of the Germans with a shot to the head. Walsh's men took Colonel Sparks to see the SS dog kennels, where the Germans kept Alsatian guard dogs. Most of the animals were already lying in pools of blood after enraged GIs shot dead 25 to 30 of them. While Sparks and his men from the 45th Infantry
Not the dogs.
Division moved deeper into the camp, units from the US 42nd Infantry Division began entering Dachau town at 1 p.m. The Assistant Divisional Commander, Brigadier General Henning Linden, quickly put together a small task force in 5 jeeps. Led by Linden, the group also included Brigadier General Charles Banville, Deputy Commander Operations, U.S. 8th Army Air Force, several staff officers, and a handful of war correspondents and photographers. Linden's group raced off to the camp's main entrance by way of the abandoned train and its gruesome human cargo. After ducking from a burst of incoming small arms fire, Linden's party dismounted from their jeeps and cautiously approached the gatehouse, its large wooden gates topped with a huge Nazi eagle and swastika. SS Untersturmführer Vicker, accompanied by an unarmed aide and Red Cross representative Victor Mara, went out to meet Linden's party. They found General Linden and his soldiers in a very dark frame of mind. Linden actually struck Vicker with a swagger stick that he carried British style, forcing the German officer to raise his hands. On Linden's order, Vicker was taken to see the evidence. Shortly after, the last commandant of Dachau was killed in mysterious circumstances. Subsequent investigations suggest that inmates used the rifle of a young American GI to execute Vicker and his aide.
Yes.
The court-martial of this private first class was begun, but later abandoned. Vicker, although an SS officer and a concentration camp veteran, had nonetheless stayed behind to surrender the camp to the Americans, and should have been treated as a prisoner of war.
Nah.
But the atmosphere on that day of liberation was very ugly.
Not for an SS officer, no. Not for an SS commandant. I guess he wasn't really the official commandant or whatever. Whatever the fuck his title is. No. Fucking kill him.
Men from Vicker's arm of service had done to the prisoners at Dachau. Troops from Company H, 222nd Infantry Regiment caught up with General Linden's party before the main gate. By now a huge mob of prisoners, cheering hysterically, surged towards the American soldiers. 25-year-old war correspondent Marguerite Higgins wanted to enter the camp and get a big scoop, the liberation of Dachau. But Colonel Sparks and men from the 157th Infantry Regiment arrived. Arguments between the officers of the two competing divisions broke out against the backdrop of the cheering prisoners. Sparks categorically refused to permit Higgins entry to the camp, as per his orders. Linden, outranking Sparks, attempted to overrule him. But Higgins managed to get inside, only to be mobbed and nearly trampled to death by hundreds of inmates. Soldiers from the 222nd and 157th Infantry both fired their weapons into the air to disperse the out-of-control inmates and rescue Higgins. It appears that General Linden took offense at one of Sparks' soldiers, who was swigging from a bottle, and rapped him on the helmet with his swagger stick. Sparks, in an outrageous display of gross insubordination, perhaps fueled by the grim and emotional sights in the camp, drew his Colt .45 pistol and levelled it at General Linden, saying, "If you don't get the F out of here, I'm going to blow your brains out." Another version of this story has Sparks yell, "If you ever touch one of my men again, I'll kill you." Either way, the two men almost came to blows before Lieutenant Colonel Walter Felton on Linden's staff jumped between them. But a fresh confrontation developed between Sparks and Felton. "I'll see you after the war," threatened Felton. "You son of a bitch," yelled back Sparks. "What's the matter with right now?" Fortunately, Linden's group left before things became any worse. In the meantime, troops from both the 222nd and 157th Infantry Regiments entered the camp. One unit machine-gunned to death 16 SS who had their hands raised in a coal yard. They were part of a larger group that included Wehrmacht troops from the nearby hospital, captured by Company I, 157th Regiment. Company I Executive Officer, Lieutenant Jack Bushyhead,
Bushyhead? What name is that?
Sioux Native American, segregated the SS from the other prisoners and marched them into the coal yard. The young GI manning the machine gun shouted that the prisoners were trying to run away and opened fire. An officer kicked the teenager away from the weapon, but he and his squad had managed to kill or wound many of the prisoners. Between 25 and 50 SS and prisoner capos were summarily dispatched by enraged prisoners, the American soldiers standing back and watching. In some cases, GIs handed the prisoners weapons. A further 17 SS were executed outside Guard Tower B, while many more were shot by sickened American troops, horrified and deeply traumatized by the piles of rotting skeletal bodies that lay unburied throughout the facility. Eventually, their officers brought US troops under control and order was restored. Though understandable, the American reprisals constituted a war crime, a potentially deeply embarrassing situation for the Allies. There was
It's a fucking SS, man.
Serious talk for a time of bringing some officers before courts martial. However, General George S. Patton, the newly appointed military governor of Bavaria, dismissed all charges. For many of the perpetrators of the horrors of Dachau, death caught up with them soon enough. The former commandant of Dachau, Eduard Weiter, tried to hide out in the Austrian mountains. Ironically, he was probably murdered at Itter by a fellow SS officer on the 2nd of May 1945.
Huh.
For the Americans, there now began the long and difficult task of trying to save as many lives as possible amongst the emaciated and diseased prisoners at Dachau. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and share. You can also support my channel at...
That was a good fucking... Mark Felton always does a great goddamn job. Like, there's... I never have much to say because he just does such a good job. I don't know. Covers everything, really. Like, I don't know, nothing else to say here. That was Liberating Dachau 1945 by Mark Felton Productions. I hope you guys enjoyed. Remember to hit that like button and subscribe for more, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.